Okay, one of my clocks in my office says it's 10:50. They all say a different time, but I think the 10:50 one is the accurate one. So thanks to everyone for being a part of Building Trades Week 2021 and attending this session. All attendees are muted, but we still want to hear from you. So you can drop questions in the chat or the Q&A to ask any questions, share comments, offer insights would be great. This session is scheduled for 30 minutes. And we will be sharing questions with the speakers in case they don't see them in the chat. So we want to thank our Building Trades Week sponsors, MACAF, which is the Michiana Area Construction Industry Advancement Fund. And that's why they call it MACAF, because that's a lot. Big C Lumber and NECA, which is the National Electrical Contractors Association Northern Indiana chapter, which is why they call it NECA. So many acronyms. Please visit the Building Trades Week landing page to learn more about our sponsors, as well as all the other businesses that are participating in this event. We are excited to welcome Sean O'Brien and Matt LaFree today. Sean is with MACAF. MACAF's mission is to provide leadership support, education, training, and advocacy to members and contributors, all focused on a common goal to advance the welfare of our construction industry. NECA is, Matt is with the IBEW and NECA. I think I have that right. He can correct me if I'm wrong. NECA is the National Trade Association for Electrical Contracting Firms, United for Industry-Wide Action. They have been the champion of electrical contracting industry since 1901. So for a little bit, just a little bit. So we're going to jump right into questions, but a reminder to students and educators, if you want to drop questions in the chat, we will, you can jump over the top of my questions and we'll get those answered. So I'm going to start with Sean and ask if you could give an overview of the construction industry, different fields, commercial, residential, just kind of an overview of that in the South Bend region and what it looks like in the South Bend Niles area.
Yeah, great. So let me start with just a couple seconds about us, the Michiana Builders Association and MACAF. We actually represent kind of a large swath of the construction industry, from general contractors to specifically focused on individual trade subcontractors, suppliers who provide materials to construction, engineering and architecture firms that are part of the whole milieu as well. So construction, everything that's out in the world gets built: buildings, roads, bridges, tunnels, antenna, sewer systems. Everything has to get built, and it takes an enormous team of people to do that. So there's different collections of different trades. There's probably about 20 different trades, I think, that work in our area alone: carpenters and electricians and plumbers, and again, that leaves out the architects and engineers and all of the others that are involved. We work primarily with commercial construction, building big buildings, but certainly some of our contractors and lots of others in the area do residential work. Your home was built by somebody, by a team of people, quite frankly. There's kind of a region for our area: Southern Michigan, Southwest Michigan, and the South Bend surrounding counties: Elkhart, Marshall, LaPorte. And there's quite a few. I don't have numbers. I would venture to say there's hundreds of construction companies in that area. Got lots more detail. What else would you like to know, Kate?
I think maybe just a little bit of an overview of, well, maybe we'll get to that in the next step. So I'm gonna jump over, and I'm just gonna ask Matt. So there are many different, obviously, trades within building trades. So that is a big umbrella. Talk a little bit about how you might choose which trade kind of speaks to you, which direction to go, and the process for getting into, use the electrical trades as the example.
Sure. Yeah. As Sean just sort of mentioned, everything that gets built needs electricity. That's something that we rely on nowadays. And so I think the sheer satisfaction of building something, obviously I'm on behalf of the electrical contractors and electrical workers today. But everything that Sean just mentioned, I mean, those are all opportunities, obviously, to kind of drive to school in the morning, or, jobs later on, and drive past it with your family and say, hey, I built that, or I powered that. I am speaking today on behalf of NECA and the IBEW. We together, that's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which is the local electrical union. Together, we have our cooperative committee that we go by the Powering America brand. And so whether that's powering your home or your business, the nuclear plant along the lake shore, or any power, solar, you see the wind turbines, that's all electrical work. And so anything that needs lights or charging a cell phone, something, simple like that, that's you're making a difference in the world and in the community.
I know when I went on a tour of the training facility, the IBEW training facility, like the first time, I had never thought about the fact that it's people who are trained as electricians who are putting security systems in buildings and sound systems and all the things you never think about. Who's actually, how do you get the training to do those kind of things? So you can go a lot of different directions, obviously, with your electrical background. So talk a little bit about the apprenticeship framework. So if someone does say we have students on here who are in the building trades class right now or not, who are interested in possibly pursuing the electrical field and that kind of an apprenticeship, what steps would they take? Maybe talk about your pathway. What was your pathway to get to where you are today?
So I took the roundabout way. I went to college first and then ended up back here. I would say, especially to students, any kind of STEM, of course, helps if you're good at math and numbers and that kind of thing. That's going to be a huge help, just with the nuts and bolts of what we do as electrical workers, whether it is, like you mentioned, commercial work or residential work, or if it's the more specialized stuff, sound and communication and low voltage kind of thing. So any kind of that obviously would help when you come into the trade, whether it's right out of high school or if you go to college first or whatever. You're going to be paid right off the bat a living wage with benefits, and you get to learn as you kind of go through the process. And so you're earning a paycheck while you're learning. If you skip college, there's no college debt or having to take out a loan or pay for it. That's all provided for you, and it's wholly supported by the contractors that I represent. And so that is something that is a little bit novel compared to a typical education that people are typically thinking of, whether it's state funded or if it's a private school. That money's coming from somewhere, and typically it's either taxpayers, it's helping pay that, or it's you as the student that's paying your tuition and board. So it's a great alternative.
Yeah, I do think now, like, we've seen kind of a return to the conversation about the earn and learn model and work-based learning, and how, I guess, it's trendy again, all of that. But apprenticeships have been doing this forever. So it's the same kind of the model. So I'm going to go to you, Sean. Let's talk about your career pathway. How did you end up where you are?
Interesting. So I'm old enough that shop classes were part of my high school education, mandatory. And I had a drafting class. It was hand drafting at the time, not CAD and computer work like everybody does now. And that hand drafting class really intrigued me. Of everything I had done in high school, I really enjoyed doing that. Ended up in architecture and worked in the architecture field as that piece of construction for a few decades. Moved on from that and ended up here. So college was definitely in my pathway. But as Matt talked about, there's any pathway you can think of to get to a career in construction. If you want to come straight out of high school and go into a construction trade, you join an apprenticeship program and get a job with a contractor, and you're working and earning and learning all right away. If you decide that you want to, work in IT, some sort of technology field, you might get a 4-year degree and end up at a construction company where technology and construction is really growing rapidly. So there's a lot of need for that. You might get into accounting or finance if you go a college route and end up again at a construction company or some related field. So there's whatever pathway you choose. If you're interested in construction, and I think Matt touched on it, the I helped build that scenario. There's nothing better than the pride when you go past a building, let's say something at Notre Dame Stadium, somebody built Notre Dame Stadium, and I'm sure for years they walked past and said, wow, I'm really proud to have contributed to that building. So, if you feel anything like that, construction is a great opportunity.
That's excellent. So, Matt, I'm going to go back to you. Maybe explain what the process looks like if somebody's coming out of high school and they want to apply to an apprenticeship program. How does that work?
It's pretty simple. You can obviously, you mentioned the training center right there off of Western on the west side of South Bend. Go in and apply in person, or there is an online aspect as well. You just apply 153.com or .org, I believe. And there's an online application as well. That's pretty much it. Well, you'll come in for the interview. You sit in front of a board of 4 trustees on the management side, 4 trustees on behalf of the IBEW. You'll kind of go through the interview and they're going to ask you a series of questions, and everybody gets the same questions. So it's very even. There's a score that's applied to that. And then there's an aptitude test ahead of that, I guess I should mention. You pass the aptitude test, they come in and then you're welcome to the interview. And then beyond the interview, it's a little bit of hurry up and wait. They have to get through several candidates, obviously, and then we start classes in the fall, and you'll go to work right away. So
I have a 2-parter question to follow up with that. So for high school students, like what kind of classes could they take that would best prepare them for that process? And if there's an adult who's hearing this session, so there's an adult who tinkers and they do a lot of electrical, but their job is not related directly to being an electrician, but they're super handy and they can fix everything in their house and they have an interest. What would it look like if I'm, say, a 28-year-old woman who my job is, I don't know, I'm a home health aide but I love fixing stuff. I like helping people, but I also like fixing stuff. And I'm thinking I want to switch it up a little bit.
sure.
What are the different ways that people can get into that apprenticeship program?
So and that's a huge thing that you just touched on right there, was that you have an interest, you have the desire to build and to do the kind of things that we're talking about right now. And one of the things that we typically hear, a lot of people, especially because we're union contractors, their grandfather was an electrician, my father was an electrician, so I'd like to be an electrician. And that's all well and good, obviously, but maybe you're not the same as your dad or your grandfather, and you have different interests. And so what actually makes you want to be? Well, if you have that desire, you're doing something now, you've been doing it for a while, and it's not your thing, this is something that you actually want to pursue. That's like the greatest answer to one of the questions they're going to ask you right off the bat. So as far as any kind of tips or anything on what are the classes to help prepare for the interview, any sort of course, English class or any kind of speech class or communications that helps you convey that message. That's more than just what you think they want to hear, but be honest and say, this is something that I'm interested in. This is some stuff I've done on the side that just kind of, whether it applies to electrical or not, I'm handy and I like to take things apart, put them back together and understand how things work. That's exactly the kind of person that would be successful in this role.
Awesome. And we have a question in the chat about dress code. So if somebody shows up for their apprenticeship interview, is it a suit and tie thing? Is it a khaki thing? Let's talk about like, what are we expecting of people who show up for those?
I don't want to say it varies because there is an expectation there. I don't know. A suit and tie obviously would be stellar. That's not necessarily everybody's, especially if you're coming out of high school. Maybe you don't even have a suit and tie. Some people are coming straight after work because the interviews start at 5 o'clock. We're sympathetic to that, but I think it's reasonable to ask for at least a pair of khakis and a button shirt or something to show a little bit of professionalism. As electricians, obviously there's some dirt that gets on the job, but there's a lot of times that's not the case. And so that we kind of do the pressed shirt and pants when we go into someone's house to put in the ceiling fan or something. We want to make sure that you're the kind of person that we can send to an elderly couple's house or whatever to do that kind of work, as well as work in the nuclear plant or in the grime under the street and stuff like that. So
there you go. So, another question. Can potential apprentices get started before they graduate? Can they apply their senior year? How does that work?
You can apply. We can't put you on a job site until you're 18, and that's the law. So that's the one thing that we don't have control over.
Are there any pre-apprenticeship programs for the electrical trades? Anything that kids can do before they're 18?
They're not, at different shops, yes, and they can hire you. That you just have to not necessarily even go through the apprenticeship. You would just talk to the contractors directly. We do have a program that's pre-apprenticeship if, say, it's not for a while that we're going to be taking students in for the apprenticeship, or if maybe you interviewed and it didn't go so well, you're having a bad day or whatever, and you have to interview a second time, which you're welcome to interview as many times as you'd like. But if you didn't get in, there's what we call a pre-apprentice and a construction wireman, which you get in and kind of get experience. You get to work with the tools. You still get benefits, and you still kind of work your way up from that construction wireman level 1, whether it's up to 2, 3, and 4. And there's education that's associated with that. That's not in the formal apprenticeship, but it's kind of, well, like I said, a pre-apprenticeship program that we call construction wiremen and construction electricians that can work their way through outside of the apprenticeship until they get that experience, and then, you know, subsequently pass the interview and whatever and get in kind of that route. And a lot of people do that, especially like I mentioned, if you're right out of high school, may not have the experience, or people that have been doing something completely different from the trade, like you mentioned, a 28-year-old, 34-year-old that kind of came in. I didn't get into this career until I was 30. So
There's always an open door, right?
that's right.
So Sean, I'm going to come back to you and say, so you have a lot of members who are a part of MACAF. What are you hearing from them as like the high demand jobs? What are they saying? Like, here's what we really need right now. And 2 years from now, we think we're going to need this. Like, what does the job prospect look like for students?
All of them. All of the trades need people. Literally every trade would take people, I think, at this point. And certainly even in the offices, in the construction companies themselves, they're out looking for office personnel, for project managers, people to run projects, people to do estimating. Given everything that's happened with the pandemic over the last year, things have slowed a little bit, but there's a bit of pent up need and demand for construction. And so that is starting to unravel itself and happen. So even by the end of this year, we could all be facing a workforce crunch where we were at a couple of years ago. Just an example, the Crossroads project at the University of Notre Dame that surrounds the stadium there, at any given point in that project, there was upwards of 1,000 people working on that thing, building it at the same time. That's a lot of people in our area. So we're not quite at those levels, but boy, I would say any trade that you're interested in, there's probably a good chance, certainly as things start back up, of getting a job.
That's excellent. So another question, what part-time job during high school would be beneficial for students to have that want to move into construction trades after high school? What would be what's their ideal part-time job?
So a couple of the things you had asked a bit earlier about, what prerequisites, things that you should maybe take in school, or things that you should do, showing up for an interview is really important in the presentation you make, because the number one thing I think that any of these trades and any job that you would interview with, they want to know that you're responsible and dedicated to what you're there to do. So any part-time job that you might have that's focused on construction certainly gives you some background if you're doing anything with your hands and being involved, but showing that you can be responsible and dedicated to that job is important to the next job. And if it's a construction job, then that's something they want to hear.
And I would say too, what we hear a lot from employers across every sector is the ability to communicate and being able to do that well. And I think I have a slide in a presentation I sometimes give to high school kids about my career interstate, as I call it, because pathway, not very straight, it's more of interstate.
Yep.
But I think retail, if it's restaurant, you learn that really important skill of navigating people, even when people aren't being at their very best behavior, and understanding that everybody has their own issues, they're bringing their personality, and learning how to navigate personalities you can do in any job that you have when you're in high school. So those people skills that I sometimes feel like we might skip right over the top of because we're so intent on those book skills, those people skills are going to be invaluable no matter what you do moving forward. So that's my mom talk for all the students who are on here. Like, understand people. I have a kid who's working in the Meyer meat department right now, and the stories he comes home with crack me up, but he is certainly learning a lot about people and how to have patience with those who might not understand how to get meat weighed or whatever. Like, he's learning a lot. So I think that's helpful. So I'm going to ask both Sean and Matt, what was your summer job? Like, what did you do? What were your summer jobs in high school? What were your first jobs?
I'm trying to think of it, landscaping. I did some landscaping, so again, related. And I think that's something with, anybody that's interested in getting into the building trades. any background that you might have in anything related to the building trades is going to be helpful when you interview to join a union or a contractor. So I would recommend something in that direction.
What about you, Matt?
I think in high school, it was mostly restaurants. I either served tables or I was back in the kitchen and washing dishes and stuff like that. Through college, it was a little bit more tough. I moved back home for the first summer and worked at Fagley Landscape. And then after that, I worked for waste management down in Lafayette, and I rode the back of a garbage truck for a summer, so a couple summers. That was pretty tough work.
Valuable lesson there too.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting, the landscape tie. So I would say to high school kids in particular, I know that South Bend Venues, Parks and Arts hires a huge contingent of teenagers in the summer to do different things around the parks and painting things and a lot of the maintenance stuff. So that, I think, having that kind of opportunity, and they have actually even incorporated into their summer hiring, they do some professional development with the kids that they're hiring in the summertime. So there are some great opportunities for young people in our community. And that I know about South Bend Venue Parks and Arts. I'm not sure what the other parks departments do with that, but one of my kids worked that and did landscaping, and he decided he never wants to be in charge of weed whacking all day, every day for the rest of his life, because he said, he's like, Mom, it's like my brain. Like I said, oh, and that noise. So, so Matt, I'm going to go back to apprenticeships. So how much do apprentices make a year? So I'm a first year apprentice. I'm coming into the program. What does it look like? And how do the wages grow with skill accumulation?
Yep. So you start out, I don't have it in front of me, but it's $12 and change with health and benefits, as well as pension. And that goes up basically for, depending on your education or whatever, it moves up basically every 1,000 to 2,000 hours, which is basically 6 months to a year, that there's a raise that goes up. And I think by the end of it, you're making closer to $25 an hour. Plus, you have two pensions. You'll have a national pension and a local pension. Health and welfare. You'll also have a money purchase plan, which is an annuity. So a little bit different on the benefit package, but yeah.
And how do you? Oh, go ahead. I think Sean was going to say something.
I was, there's a range on the trades, but what Matt's identified, and we talked about this a little bit offline earlier, the idea of putting that into an annual salary piece. So figure about 2,000 hours a year if somebody works full-time every week, so 40 hours a week. So, at $25 an hour, you're looking at about $50,000 a year, and that's pretty good wage. And that doesn't include, as Matt was starting to get into, some of the benefit package stuff that you get, health insurance and a retirement plan, which is almost unheard of these days. So there's stuff that may not appeal to you guys as high school kids right now, but there's opportunities there. Some of the other trades, we do a lot of work with sheet metal, for example, and the sheet metal trade, by the time they're done with their apprenticeship program, they're in the, again, if they're working 2,000 hours a year, they're getting in the 60,000s range. And that's pretty good for only being a few years in and still being in school.
And so that's a question I have on the balancing of what I would call the book learning. So the on-the-job training and the book learning. How does that, is there a set, is the schedule set for those who are in these apprenticeship programs so they know when they'll go to class and when they'll be at work? Do they navigate that themselves? What does that look like?
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to, so I'll throw it a little bit, Matt, and then you pick it up. The Department of Labor with union apprenticeship programs puts together kind of the guidelines for what those programs are. And they're rather stringent because there's a lot of safety involved in construction. You really have to learn some very specific things, and you have to learn some safety because you're going to be left alone as a journeyman, as somebody who's graduated your apprentice program out on a job site. And you need to be responsible for yourself. So Matt, I'll hand that off. I just wanted to throw that piece out, and I'll let you pick up the rest of that.
That I think is the main thing. There is a set schedule, and they are required to navigate it themselves. The typical workday, starts at 7, ends at 3:30. They're going to get back and have class at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's so many days per week. And it just kind of depends on what time of year that therein. In summertime, we kind of take a hiatus from education because work is so busy that they may be working more than 8 hours a day if they're lucky. And we're booming trying to get stuff finished before the winter time, which is still happening outside my window here.
Shh, we're pretending that's not happening. There's no snow in Indiana, not in April. Never. So I had a question on elaborating on what a pension means. So talking about, I guess, the thing that most 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds aren't thinking about their retirement, but when you're 18, it's a great time to be thinking about your retirement and what you could do next. So Sean just wants to jump in there with the pension. What's a pension mean, Sean?
I do. Well, so the neat thing about a construction career, if you choose especially the union route, you have an opportunity to make it a career, something you can spend your lifetime doing and support your family pretty well. So one of the pieces of that is that when you get to an older age, actually around my age, quite frankly, especially when you've worked in construction for a while, it can be harder on your body maybe than an indoor sit-down type of career. You can retire, and a pension plan, there's different versions of them and the way that they work, but effectively you make money in retirement. You can cease working and make a pretty good income not working. And that is the payoff, if you will, for a hard career of construction. So it's an important piece that we can't explain to young guys and women too often what retirement looks like, because you're just getting started. But it's something you'll think about eventually, and you'll say, hey, wow, this is really worth something to have this retirement plan. So there's a little bit about what a pension is.
And I think that's a good reminder to students, no matter what your first job is, whether it's straight out of high school, out of college, whatever you're looking at, to fully explore the benefits that are available through those jobs, because you've probably heard about compound interest, and the earlier you start saving, the better it is for retirement. So no matter whether you go the apprenticeship route, whatever route you take into your career, whether it's in building trades or whatever else, to make sure that you explore those options and don't kind of leave them on the table, especially if you have the opportunity to get some matching funds from whoever your employer is. And really, I kind of feel like that's the pension is kind of like the ultimate matching funds program for retirement. And I don't know if Matt wants to say any more about like what that looks like. And you said you came into this a little bit later. So like talk about how that looked to you when you came in at an older age.
Yeah, my benefits package, because I'm not in the field, I'm what they call a non-bargaining unit. So I am not represented under the collective bargaining agreement that NECA has with the IBEW. So my package was kind of negotiated. I did it myself and kind of came in that way. But it's important to note, especially as Sean mentioned, that these are union that we're talking about. And you just touched on the employer match. And so when I say that somebody comes in, they're making, let's call it $30,000 a year, that's actually costing your employer closer to like $50,000. And by the time you get to the top of apprenticeship, not even the journeyman wages, when you're making, I've got it pulled up here, closer to 60, it's actually going to cost your employer closer to $100,000 because they're actually paying for your health and welfare. They are paying for that pension. And Sean kind of touched on the difference of the pensions. As I mentioned, we have a national pension, we have a local pension, and then we have the annuity pension, which is a different one yet. And there's some different nuances to how those are. But essentially, the longer you work, the more, each year of work constitutes as a credit, and a credit is worth so many dollars a month in retirement. So the more credits you have, the more you make per month in retirement. And then obviously with 1, 2, or 3 pensions, however that works for your career, that's all basically provided to you. And you can take your own money, obviously, and do your own 401k or whatever on the side as a fourth option.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. And I know we're close to our time on this, and New Prairie's bell is going to ring. I see this in the chat that their bell is going to ring. So I want to thank both Sean and Matt and the attending students and educators. I encourage everyone to visit the Building Trades Day landing page. The panels are being recorded, so you have opportunities to learn from other employers, educators during different sessions, and community partners about whatever construction career pathway you might find interesting. Lots of information out there. So Sean, Matt, any parting wisdom for our students as we conclude this session? Sean, go first. Be
Uh,
wise.
there is so much for us to say and talk about with the construction industry. I think it's a great opportunity if you're looking for something flexible and dynamic. You want to work outside, you want to work inside, you don't want to sit at a desk. Construction's a great opportunity. If anybody, we're happy here at MACAF to answer questions, give us a call, stop by. We can do more sessions, however that might work, because we've got lots of things that we like to talk about.
Excellent. And Matt?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody that's on with us today. We kind of ended it on money, but I want to go back to, I guess, as my final words, to where we started. And that was kind of the pride behind construction. And when you have a career like this, that there's a fulfilling factor to waking up every day and seeing stuff that you've done years ago or whatever, that there's more to it than just money. Obviously, that's an important thing, and that's what everybody's kind of looking at right out the gate at high school. But keep in mind, when you're looking back at things 10, 15, 20 years from now, that you can say, I was there when.
That is really cool. It's a great opportunity. And we do have one bonus question here at the end. Is there a job shadowing option for high school students on construction sites? Is there a variable with that? Like, what would that look like?
I'm going to jump in a little bit while Matt's thinking that up. The difficulty is that job sites, again, are a safety factor. And so the shadowing aspect of it, I'm not really familiar with too many people that can handle that reality out there. Certainly to walk them around and show them a site for a period of time with this protective gear and the things that need to happen, that's great. But probably more in the residential universe, I think there'd be job shadowing opportunities.
That's exactly where I was kind of headed, to think past the safety issues that are kind of arise out of an issue like that. We could probably definitely orchestrate a day, whether it's a tour of one of the contractor's facilities, or if they could arrange it to go on a job site or something, kind of a one-off thing. But I don't know as far as any kind of summer job or anything like that would be, you expect it to either be on the job and be productive, or be safe and kind of keep a distance.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thanks again to both of you for being on, to being a part of this conversation, and to all the students and educators who attended. And please make sure to check out the recording and the other recordings of the different sessions. And we appreciate all of you. So thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.